Local administration in the Vadodara city of India's western pole-bound Gujarat state hoisted a giant balloon atop a government building as part of an election awareness campaign. The balloon mentioning the date of the elections, December 14th, and reading "Vote Vadodara" is the Election Commission's way of constantly reminding the residents to exercise their right to vote. The Indian Railways has commissioned a solid-state interlocking system, the largest in Asia, at a station in eastern Kharagpur town. The system will enable setting 800 different routes for trains in a matter of just minutes against 423 route capacity of the previous route relay interlocking. A railway official has said that the new mechanism will enhance security as it prevents conflicting movements of trains through an arrangement of tracks, such as junctions or crossings. Frothing in a polluted lake in Bengaluru raised alarm among the residents. The froth has been a perennial problem in Bellandur Lake, one of the largest lakes of the city, due to high content of ammonia and phosphate and low oxygen levels, a result of inflow of sewage and harmful effluents. A group of tour operators from across the country visiting Kashmir have said that the northernmost state was absolutely safe for tourists, in contrast to the image that has been created in the minds of people by the media. The tour operators' visit was aimed at providing an impetus to the tourism sector in the volatile state, which has been hit hard by a separatist insurgency now in its 28th year. It's the end of the Mugabe era. After much back and forth, the Zimbabwean president has resigned. Zimbabwe's Emerson Mnangagwa, whose sacking as vice president sparked the crisis that led to Robert Mugabe's resignation, could be named as the country's next leader. Mugabe was in power since the country's independence in 1980. This ends his 37-year-old rule. The announcement came while the impeachment proceedings were underway during a joint session of the country's parliament. People danced in the streets of Harare and car horns blared in celebration through the night on Tuesday after news that era of Robert Mugabe's rule was finally over. Crowds in the capital marked the historic moment by singing and cheering in the streets alongside members of the military. The British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson has said that Robert Mugabe's resignation gave Zimbabwe a turning point to go forward to free and fair elections next year. US President Donald Trump spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and the two leaders stressed the importance of the UN-led peace process in resolving the Syrian civil war. In more than an hour-long phone call, Trump and Putin also agreed to explore ways to cooperate in the fight against militant groups such as the Islamic State. The two leaders also discussed how to achieve peace in Ukraine and the need to keep pressure on North Korea to end its nuclear program. Immigration advocates responded quickly and loudly to the United States' decision to end the special status given to about 59,000 Haitian immigrants that protects them from deportation after a devastating 2010 earthquake. The decision by acting Homeland Security Secretary Elaine Duke gives Haitians 18 months to return to their impoverished Caribbean country or legalize their status in the United States. Few men or women have left their mark on their nation the way Fidel Castro has done for Cuba. So when his death was announced in November last year, it was only fitting that Cuba arranged for a 9-day mourning period to say goodbye. As a caravan carrying Castro's ashes made its way through the Caribbean nation of some 12 million people, hundreds of thousands of Cubans came out to the streets to bid their final farewell. Britain's Brexit Minister David Davis has said that reaching a deal with the European Union was the most likely outcome of the talks, but added that the British government was prepared for no agreement with the bloc. Both sides have spoken of their frustration at a lack of progress in negotiations so far, although Davis has said that talks had made real and tangible progress. Amsterdam expects an economic boost, its deputy mayor said on Tuesday, after the city won the right to host one of the EU's agencies post-Brexit. The European Medicines Authority, a key element in the continent's healthcare industry, will be moving from London to Amsterdam after the Dutch pulled level with early leader Milan and tied the runoff that was eventually decided by drawing lots from a fishbowl. German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier met party leaders from the Greens and the Free Democrats to explore possibilities for forming a government after talks on forging a new ruling coalition broke down. The collapse of the efforts to form a three-way governing coalition with Chancellor Angela Merkel's conservative bloc has thrown Germany into a political uncertainty phase and raised the prospect of new elections. Leaders of Cyprus, Greece and Egypt met in Cypriot capital Nicosia to discuss the newly discovered gas deposits in the eastern Mediterranean. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras and Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi were greeted at the presidential palace by Cypriot President ahead of the talks expected to focus on energy, security and illegal immigration. About 400 Catalan government civil servants gathered in front of the General Government building in central Barcelona to protest against Article 155, which gave Madrid direct control over Catalonia's institutions. Protesters also called for the release of the members of the sacked Catalan government held in remand while an investigation into their role in Catalonia's banned independence drive takes place. Lebanon's former Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri landed in Beirut, returning home for the first time since he has resigned as the Prime Minister in a broadcast from Saudi Arabia that plunged his country into a political crisis. Hariri's sudden resignation on November 4th thrust Lebanon to the forefront of a regional power struggle between the Sunni monarchy of Saudi Arabia and the Shiite Islamist Iran. Hariri paid his respects at the grave of his father, Rafiq al-Hariri, who was assassinated in 2005 in a massive explosion that killed 21 others. Hariri's supporters cheered for his return in Lebanon on Tuesday. Cheering supporters gathered outside his residence in central Beirut, while others drove through the streets waving his future movement flags. Supporters have said that they prefer that Hariri stays on his position and that they will respect his decision. Some said there is no such thing called as Lebanon without Hariri. Lebanon also marks its Independence Day today, with its sovereignty as compromised as ever by the agendas of foreign states that have shaped its history since the French mandate ended in 1943. The crisis ignited by Saad al-Hariri's sudden resignation as Prime Minister is unprecedented even by the standards of a country where loyalties have been split between countries such as Iran and Saudi Arabia regionally, and the United States, France and Russia globally. Lebanon's President Michel Aoun told Arab states that dealing with Lebanon required wisdom, otherwise the country would be pushed towards the fire. Aoun's warning followed an Arab League meeting on Sunday, whose closing communique condemned the Iran-backed Lebanese Shiite group Hezbollah for supporting terrorism and noted that it was part of the Lebanese government. A suicide bomber killed at least 50 people in northeastern Nigeria on Tuesday in an attack on a mosque which bore the hallmarks of a faction of the Islamist militant group Boko Haram. The bombing in Mubi in Adamawa state was one of the deadliest in Nigeria's northeast since President Buhari came to power in 2015, pledging to end Boko Haram's 8-year insurgency and attacks by the group on civilian and military targets. At least 23 people were killed and 60 wounded when a suicide bomber set off a truck bomb near a crowded marketplace in the northern Iraqi town of Tuz Kurmatu on Tuesday. Most of the casualties were civilians. The death toll was expected to rise because many of the wounded were in critical condition. Iraq's Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi said Islamic State had been defeated from a military perspective, but he would only declare final victory after the IS militants were routed in the desert. Iraqi forces on Friday captured the border town of Rawa, the last remaining town under the Islamic State control, signaling the collapse of the group's caliphate proclaimed after it overran much of Iraq's north and west in 2014. Rescuers searching for an Argentine Navy submarine that went missing in the South Atlantic nearly a week ago, with 44 crew members aboard, were expected to be able to pick up the pace on Tuesday as fierce weather abated. Storms and high winds have limited the search for the Arasan 1 in the past several days. Overnight searchers found an empty raft floating in the ocean and also noticed white flares from a distance. The verdict in the war crimes trial of former Bosnian Serb army chief Ratko Mladic is expected at The Hague today. This after over 5 years of receiving evidence and arguments, 72-year-old Mladic is accused of genocide, murder, acts of terror and other crimes against humanity during the 1992 to 1995 Bosnian War. He was one of the first big names from the wars that followed the breakup of Yugoslavia to be indicted by the court, and the last of them to go to trial. U.S. prosecutors have charged an Iranian national with hacking into cable TV network HBO and stealing episodes and plot summaries for unaired programs including Game of Thrones, then threatening to release the data unless he was paid $6 million. Behzad Mesri, also known as Scott Vashat, was charged with the hack in a sealed indictment that was released on Tuesday by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan. Peru's national police arrested 8 people, including an Italian and a Colombian, from 2 criminal groups and seized about 100 kilograms of cocaine during various operations on the weekend. The operations were carried out in the capital Lima, the northern city of Trujillo, and the Andean city of Huancayo. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang called for joint efforts to keep the China-Japan relationship moving on the right path. Li made the call when meeting a 250-member Japanese business delegation in Beijing. He said that he hopes that the two sides to see one another's development as their opportunity and contribute to the building of the East Asia Economic Community via innovative cooperation and healthy competition. A fire broke out at a construction site in Chengdu City in China. Firefighters quickly arrived for the fight as fierce fire, heavy smoke, and flames shrouded the site. The construction on the site is currently building its underground part. Thus, there were a large amount of inflammable materials like building boards on site. And workers and personnel were evacuated promptly and no casualties were reported. Russia's meteorological service has said that it had measured pollution of a radioactive isotope at nearly 1,000 times the normal levels in the Ural Mountains. The the first official Russian data supporting reports that an accident had taken place. The data appears to support a report by the French Nuclear Safety Institute, IRSN, which said on November 9th that a cloud of radioactive pollution over Europe had indicated that an accident had taken place at a nuclear facility either in Russia or Kazakhstan in the last week of September. Turkey's Coast Guard rescued 6 crew members from a Russian cargo ship after it drifted in stormy weather off the coast of the Black Sea city of Bartın. A helicopter was rushed to the scene after receiving an emergency call from the ship for evacuation. The ship was towed to the Turkish port of Bartın later. An eyewitness captured amateur footage of traffic driving through flooded streets in the Saudi port city of Jeddah. Schools and universities in Jeddah were closed due to the adverse weather conditions, and some roads and tunnels were also closed due to flooding. A 60-year-old Canadian man arrived at the port of Piraeus in Greece after having kayaked alone from Oslo. This in order to promote a campaign that rewards acts of peace, kindness, and humanity. Mark Furman, a hobby kayaker from Vancouver who now lives in Norway, paddled for 183 days through the seas, rivers, and the channels of 15 European countries on a 5,400-kilometer journey that began in April. U.S. President Donald Trump participated in the 70th National Thanksgiving Turkey Pardoning Ceremony in the Rose Garden of the White House in Washington. After announcing that Wishbone and Drumstick will join the 2 turkeys that President Barack Obama pardoned last year, Trump said that he is not allowed to reverse Obama's turkey pardons. The 2 lucky turkeys will live out the rest of their days at Virginia Tech University.